I realised that I had all of the sort of management and organisational skills that I'd learnt from all my previous roles. We're so regimented and in the mindset of we have to have security of, national insurance and tax paid, and because we're scared. And actually, ultimately, it's that fear of not knowing how to do all this stuff that holds us back. Role. Incredible. I absolutely adore working with children. Really passionate. I learned so much about growth mindset, which has changed my perspective on the world.
Hello and welcome to Get a Shift On, your podcast all about career change, career transition, and showcasing that change really is possible. This morning, I'm really delighted to welcome Amanda Hitchin. Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Amanda and I met on LinkedIn, and Amanda runs her own children's counselling service, which is absolutely fantastic and so needed. And I look forward to hearing about the work that you do. Amanda is also a podcaster herself with the New Therapist in Town. It's available wherever, and we'll put some links at the end. And also is, I believe, in the top 100 female entrepreneurs in the UK. Amanda, that's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, that was quite unexpected. That happened this year. And that was Small Business Britain.
Tell me more. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I found out in November and was sworn to secrecy. I think it was November, which was really hard because I had a girls' holiday planned for a friend. So I had to keep absolutely quiet on that holiday about it, but I was really excited. And then I didn't hear anything until sort of about a week before it was due to be released publicly. And so I was absolutely convinced it had been a massive error and, they'd made a big mistake. So when I then got the email of all the press releases, it felt very real, and I was, very honoured. And I ended up being at the House of Lords, and it's just been incredible. I've actually met the most phenomenal network of women who, of course, are all absolutely, completely bossing it in their own way. Yeah, and it's completely opened my world up, actually. It's been pretty incredible.
Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations. What an exciting opportunity. And I can only imagine how much that has opened up. And to meet all those other female entrepreneurs must be so exciting. And a trip to the House of Lords as well. That's brilliant. Absolutely awesome. I want to start right at the beginning. I know we talked a little bit before off camera about where it all began, what happened. Explain to everybody watching and listening, where did your career journey start and what were some of the pivotal moments in that career?
Don't ever ask a psychotherapist where something starts, because we'll be here all day. Firstly, so
we have time.
Let's start with career. So I worked in education for over 16 years, trained in early years initially, and did sort of every role within education, from support staff, forest school teaching, all the way up early years teaching, and then ended up teaching and ended up coming out of teaching and going into school leadership, into a pastoral and safeguarding lead role. Incredible. I absolutely adore working with children. Really passionate. I learned so much about growth mindset, which has changed my perspective on the world and my own mindset. And that I credit with everything that I do. I think, you learn from every mistake when you have a growth mindset, and you never stop learning. So that passion for learning really comes from within, and it's something I'm really passionate about with others in every capacity. And then sort of mid-pandemic, so 2020, I was made redundant, which was a complete, surprise, completely unexpected. And so I was faced at the first point of the first lot of the sort of furlough we were all put on in lockdown. That scheme was ending. The first lot of that scheme was ending. So actually there was a massive recruitment crisis going on where nobody could get employment. There were so many people looking for work who had probably had a head start on me because they'd been made redundant probably slightly earlier. And so I was, every role I was applying for before I'd even finished writing my application, the role had closed due to being full. So I found myself sort of in this recruitment sort of panic, and I took the opportunity, actually. I sort of found part-time roles very easily. I actually trained to be a vaccinator during COVID. So I'd done all the training and I was awaiting a start date for that. And then at the last minute, I sort of had a discussion with someone close to me, and, I sort of thought I was likely to take on a part-time role at that point because I just needed something. And I thought, if I'm going to work part-time, maybe I could fit in my master's, my degree alongside it, as you do, fit in a
Easy.
master's
Just
with a
slide it in, yeah.
yeah. I did my foundation degree and my BA whilst working, so I knew I could juggle, and I know I'm good at multitasking. So I ended up actually taking, and the redundancy pay was a massive help. Obviously, I'd had quite a few years in education, so that really helped cushion the financial loss of income, the supervision that I had to pay for, the personal therapy that I had to pay for, the books, and as a master's student, didn't get student loans, so that helped cover the fees. So it would have been probably inaccessible to me had I not have had that opportunity presented. Yeah, so that's how I ended up doing an MA in psychodynamic counselling, which was something I always kind of wanted to do. It was something I was always really passionate about, but just couldn't justify the loss of income for a couple of years originally to do that. So yeah, it kind of did open up a door to me that I hadn't thought would be possible to walk through.
That's incredible. And it's amazing, isn't it? When you have that opportunity through redundancy, that catalyst that propels you to do something that you probably always wanted to do, but as you say, couldn't have the financial resources, couldn't take the time away from work. It's such a big commitment. But actually having that freedom that redundancy gives you, as hard as it is, and I'm sure that it didn't feel great to be made redundant, because it never does. It's quite a personal attack, I think. Even if you want to leave, I think it can feel like a real kick in the teeth. And it's a hard pill to swallow, especially on the ego.
Hmm.
But it does give you that opportunity to move forward. And clearly you have really taken that and run with it. What happened next? When did you start your clinic? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I during my training, I worked in various places. So I worked in a couple of a high school and a primary school, working with young people. And then towards the very end of my training, when the schools were closing, I'd finished my formal teaching at the university around sort of May, June sort of time. And so I had this really long period till about December when I would get my results. So November, December time when I'd get my results. So I was fortunate enough to be contacted by someone that owned a private practice. And so I was given a student placement there. And so I saw out sort of my final few months of my course working there. Actually, once I started doing that, I realised that I could do it. I think I realised that I had all of the sort of management and organizational skills that I'd learned from all my previous roles. And actually, when they say, pressure makes a diamond, I think, not that I'm calling myself a diamond, God, big ego. But what I'm saying is, I went for a really rough time. I purposely went to a school that was in a really challenging situation, in a really challenging area, to reach those children that I really was passionate about helping. And in doing so, I absolutely, threw myself into a fire, and it was really challenging. Pandemic, I was looking after 120 vulnerable families who were my responsibility, holding child protection meetings from my loft room and, bringing that into my own home. So it was really, really tough, really demoralizing at times, working in safeguarding in a challenging area, lots of systemic issues that people can't control. So that felt quite hopeless on many occasions. So coming from that, and actually coming to something where I realized everything that I went through, even though it was awful in the moment, even though it was really challenging, really, really personally taxing, all of those things had actually equipped me with what I needed to kind of set up something that was much more restorative and healing and positive. And it felt like there was hope in what I'm doing now. And so working at that private practice really helped me to learn how to manage myself, how to be more independent within that role. And so I worked at this private practice for, I think it was almost a year, maybe just a bit over. And in the process of doing that, I kept walking up and down this hill in my city, which is just, it's lovely. It's a really lovely, like period buildings, historical buildings. And I kept seeing this hand printed sign and, just been typed out on Word or something. It was really rustic and it just said, offices to let, call so and so. And I'd walked past this sign for months and I just thought, no, the building's too fancy and, it's too grand. I probably wouldn't be able to afford it, or it wouldn't be suitable for what I need. But I was just so fascinated by this build. Like, it's just such a beautiful building. One day I just took a photo of the poster. And so I kept that photo on my phone for a few more months. And then eventually one morning I just texted and I just said, look, this is what I do. Is this something that you think would be possible? And I actually did that because the private counselling practice I was at, was really busy. Like there wasn't enough rooms and wasn't enough spaces for all the therapists that were there. So I was really struggling to get a good block of time where I could work. Also, because I work with children, I have a little trolley like an air hostess that I was wheeling about from my garage to my car to schools, excuse me, and into practices. So every client has their own box, and they need the toys and equipment to express themselves, and particularly when you're working with younger children. And so, whilst this place was beautiful, it was an adult focused centre. And so, it wasn't really equipped in terms of having stuff there readily available. And I just thought, I'm so sick of having this mobile office. My garage is full, my car's always full. And so I thought I would just love to have a hub. I would just love to have this one space in which I could make a really beautiful environment that was safe and welcoming and child focused. I guess that comes from designing classrooms and displays for years as well. So yeah, I just asked, and then I got a phone call from this lovely gentleman, absolute delight. He's now retired, sadly, but he was an absolute delight, and he was in charge of the lets for this organisation, and they actually had so many of their staff work remotely during the pandemic. And that was actually working better for them as an organisation, that they had these surplus rooms. And so I took one of their rooms. It was like an office room at the time, and I looked around. There was really old furniture in there, and it looked, it was in a bit of a sad state. It needed a bit of a spruce up, but I could see its potential. And I thought, I love everything about the building. Felt right, and it felt good and safe, and so I took it on. And that was only ever going to be the plan, just for me to work there in that one office. And then yeah, and then it sort of went a bit crazy from that point onwards, really.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that story. Isn't that great? And it's amazing, isn't it, when you see the signs that are there and quite
Yeah,
literally, and you walk past it every day, you're seeing it, it's just there niggling away. And then finally you get to do something about it. I think that's really just very exciting. And do you still have those premises? Is that where you
yes.
still operate from?
Yes,
That's
so now
amazing.
I have 3 rooms in that premises, and I
And I
now have a
presume no old
team.
furniture.
No old furniture, no, that's all gone sadly. It was office furniture, not period furniture. Obviously, that would have been
Yeah.
ideal. But no, and in fact, actually, my newest room opened last June, and that was specifically designed with clients that I've worked with in mind. And I actually created quite an innovative space, which is a psychotherapy sensory room. So I don't yet have, well, I haven't yet heard of any other spaces like it. I've heard of
Amazing.
lots of therapy rooms, I've heard of lots of sensory rooms, but what I was seeing was a lot of my caseload was neurodiverse. And then when you get a reputation for being helpful or good with a certain client group, people refer you and pass you on, and the community sort of hear about you more. And so without meaning to, that's kind of become my niche, working with neurodiverse young people. So, I just saw there was a massive gap in the market for
Interesting.
young people with
Yeah.
autism or ADHD to actually be able to heal in an environment that felt suitable for them
Yeah.
and in a
So
way that
important.
felt,
I think that's,
yeah.
yeah, so very important. I think so prevalent, so kind of front and center of so much that we hear about.
Mhm.
Something I've actually looked at myself, because in this process, in both the podcast and the business that I run, the more and more people I speak to, the higher percentage of people who talk about being neurodiverse in some way. And it starts to, just a bit like your sign in the window, it just
Yes,
starts to sit there. And I
it's
think, hang on a
there.
second, is there more to this? And then I wonder, actually, to touch on adults, that actually, if you are unsettled in a job, if you're unhappy, is some of that because you just don't fit the system, and not fitting the system is often part of that neurodivergence, and having something that just doesn't quite tick societal's boxes? So it's a very interesting trait to examine. And I'm sure in children it must be absolutely fascinating to see that and work with it, especially from such a young age.
Yeah,
I want to just go
absolutely.
back and talk about your skills.
Mhm,
So I think the skills is really important when you start your own business, when you step away from something that you've known, be it through quitting or redundancy, that looking at the skills is really, really important. How did you manage to find and tune those skills that you had? Because I think people get stuck,
mhm.
especially teachers. You are a teacher, you're defined by that role, and your skill set can seem quite limited until you actually stop and think about it, because it's so much more than just decorating a classroom, making sure
Yes.
that the posters are on the wall straight. How did you really get to define those skills for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't in some ways, I don't think I had an option. Coming out, I could have gone for another teaching role, but at the time, I'd already transitioned out of that role for a reason. It wasn't working for me personally, and and at the time that I did, I didn't really, and obviously coming, that's a really tricky question. Coming back from a redundancy, like you say, that did knock my self esteem. It completely threw me sideways, even though it was explicitly explained on numerous occasions that it was absolutely nothing to do with my skill set or ability. And I knew that actually because I'd actually smashed an Ofsted recently before that. So I knew I was the only thing that was positive in the whole school report at that time. So I knew it wasn't a personal thing. I knew it wasn't my practice, but it still, it still felt like, as a rejection. It still felt, unfortunately, it was like more of a systems issue with finances and stuff within the school. But yeah, it took me a little while to go away and sort of, lick my wounds, come back and look at myself again and say, actually, am I? And especially when I was then not able to find the jobs, and I thought, oh, this is it, me bottom of the pile all of a sudden, And so it would have been so easy to sort of shift into thinking I am what the world is telling me I am right now, which is you know, not successful, not able to bounce back. I think what then happened was it freed me to do something that I was passionate about. And I think that is the most important thing with any shift in role or change in your identity. You don't have to change your identity. I'm still teaching. I'm teaching in a very different way, but I am helping young people to learn themselves. And I think I'm still working with young people, which at the core of it was something I was really passionate about. That brings me a lot of joy. My inner child gets to play, and connect with young people on their mental level, which is probably about right for me. But I still had all of those elements that I loved in my previous roles, and why I was probably drawn to my previous roles. But I'd shifted some of the not so fun parts in some ways. And I think for my self confidence and self esteem, like getting an MA in what I do was never something I thought would be possible for me. Never in a million years. At school, I struggled with academics and I was probably bottom of the class. I had to go back into my education as an adult. So to suddenly be standing there with a piece of paper that says, actually, I am qualified and I know what I'm talking about was really powerful. In terms of like the skills that I needed, I realized really quickly I didn't have any of them. So I had lots of them, but there were lots that I didn't have. So when I said I accidentally became a business owner, I absolutely did. That one office was supposed to just be me being a therapist. That was my identity at that point. And that very quickly escalated to having now a team of, there's 9 of us in my practice and 3 rooms to manage, which comes with so many layers of complexity. Not just my own organising and caseload.
Yeah.
I'm now having to make sure there are policies in place. There's safety, there's all of these other things that are needed to make the space compliant, safe, reliable, and successful in our industries. Yeah, I suddenly had to spend a very quick amount of time learning whilst in the deep end. I would recommend if you're going to do something like that, maybe do a bit of research first, do the learning bits first. There's so many amazing programs out there for free. Local authorities often run business training and 6-week courses. Small Business Britain are incredible. Everything they offer is free. And I've learnt since, I'm like, that all makes sense now. If only I'd done all this the other way around, this would have been amazing. But that's not the way I work.
That's not the way it works. And actually, sometimes that's the fun of it. That
Yeah.
the hardness that you have to struggle through almost. And that light bulb moment at the end where you go, oh, yeah, now it all makes sense. Yeah, if I'd known that. But then I kind of think that's part of it, a part of that journey, I guess, is that you are understanding, you get the skills that you have, the skills that you don't have, you merge them together, and you end up with these 3 rooms, 9 staff, and you go, wow, I've got a business. And clearly you are doing very well at it. And I think you mentioned right back early on about growth mindset. Talk me through your thoughts on growth mindset and why it's so important to you and how others can try and implement it for themselves.
Yeah, I think, I was introduced to it by a phenomenal teacher, and she was doing a middle leadership sort of program training. And so she'd chosen, you had to choose like one sort of focus or study to implement as part of that training. And she'd chosen growth mindset. And I kind of thought, what does that mean? I didn't know what it was, but I was having to support her because I was working in her classroom and supporting the same children. So I had to get on board with learning it really quickly because I was also expected to, take part in all of this, implementing it to the young people. And actually, as we were sort of teaching it, I was thinking, this is really good. Like, this is really powerful. And, Carol Dweck is, if you haven't read her book, absolutely read her book. But the power of mindset is just phenomenal. And it's not, it's not saying things are going to be perfect and magical and everything's going to be great in your life. It's saying, actually, you're going to get things wrong. You're going to learn by getting things wrong. But what you do next is what matters. So if you don't know something, it's not that you don't know it, not that you can't do it, it's that you can't do it yet. So just add the word yet. And I always ask anyone that knows me, they'll say, oh, I can't do that. And I go, yet, roll their eyes now. But,
My kids do the
actually,
same.
yeah, because I think actually, if you are really passionate about something, you can learn it. Anyone's got the capacity to learn anything if they actually want to apply themselves to it. So, yeah. And you're never too old. Like, that's the one thing I've learned along my journey into education as an adult as well, going back into education. You're never too old. So don't think you can't retrain and have a whole new career, because you absolutely can. And actually, you think of the retirement age is slowly creeping up. So you could have potentially another 20 years or, 30 years, 40, however old you are, even if
Yeah.
it's 5 years, it could be 5 incredible years of doing something you never dreamed you could do. So again, it's that growth mindset. Don't cap yourself because of your age or your abilities.
I think that's so important, and you're so right. And it's something that I bang on about. I say my kids roll their eyes because I say yeah a lot. In fact, they hate it when I say it, but they'll get it eventually. And the age thing is really interesting. So I tend to work with people who are a similar age of us because, yes, 20, 30 years down the line, we're still going to be working.
Hmm.
We can't get
Yeah.
away from that unless we win the lottery, which is very unlikely. I'd probably have to play it first.
Same.
So having that mindset is great. And I think, actually, I had someone on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and she's 58, and she finally quit her business to start her own thing and is now helping women with menopause. And she's basically working on something that she was passionate as a child, but was told to not do it because it would never make her any money. And so now she's incorporating creativity into helping women through menopause. And it's fantastic, right? Don't cap where you're at. I think it's so important to have that growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And
It makes
also,
such a difference.
entrepreneurship in itself is just a phenomenal option that so many people just overlook. We're so regimented and in the mindset of we have to have security of, national insurance and tax paid, and because we're scared. And actually, ultimately, it's that fear of not knowing how to do all this stuff that holds us back. But what I can say is having that freedom and independence to be flexible around my own personal needs, my own personal time commitments, my own family commitments has just been completely incredible. And I'm not saying it's not challenging. I'm the worst boss I've ever had. I am such a taskmaster. I'm always, working myself late into the night and early in the mornings, and, but you do that to build and to start. So,
And I think we're all guilty of that. Any entrepreneur, any business owner is guilty of being the worst boss. And yet I would never want to go back and have a boss. And I think that transformation of having that freedom, and I talk about it so much, is absolutely key. And that's the bit that I want people to try and understand. And you've summarized it so beautifully, that the freedom you have, the way it works when you step away from what you think we
mhm.
should be doing and that work that we should be doing. What were the challenges that you faced in starting the business that you managed to overcome?
Yeah, time boundaries would have been probably the first one. Not having a clue how to market or, advertise. So I set up the practice, and on the first week, I had about 4 people booked into the first day that I was open. I'd spent all this money on, I got secondhand furniture and sort of upscaled it as much as I could, and tried to get, I had a garage full of children's classroom toys and things. So I had quite a lot of the stuff that I needed. And as a trainee therapist, I had to have a lot of the stuff that I needed anyway. So I was able to sort of set up the space. But then on the first day, 4 clients booked in over the course of sort of maybe from 10 in the morning till 9 at night. Not a single one turned up. And I sat there that whole day waiting and waiting for each next client. And I sat there and thought, God, what have I done? Like, I've made a massive mistake. And then actually on the second day that I planned to work, because you just fill up, 1 or 2 days to start with. On the second day that week that I planned to work, everyone turned up. And actually, a lot of those people that hadn't turned up had contacted me and said, "I'm really sorry, we, misplaced the time," or couldn't, for whatever reason, they couldn't make it. But yeah, so then it was like oh, thank goodness, like people have actually turned up, and now I can finally, but the anticlimax of working, for like a month solidly of building this beautiful space, building furniture, getting everything ready and being so excited, and then no one turning up. I was like, what?
Soul destroying.
Yeah.
Not really the validation you were after, I'm sure.
No, no, absolute terror really that I'd made a massive blunder. But yeah, no, thankfully people did turn up, and then thankfully they got a really good deal and a really good experience, and they were able to use the space, and then they recommended me, and so it snowballs.
And did you have good support from family and friends when you were going through that process, and when you said to them about, "Oh, I'm going to start my own clinic and do my own thing"? What was the feedback then?
I'm not really someone that I don't tend to take other people's advice all that well. I tend to just go in like a ball in a
Just do
china
it.
shop. Once I know what you're jumping in at the deep end again, but once I have an idea, and by the time I've voiced my idea, I've already been thinking it over probably for a few months, and I have thought of every detail and every question and every thought about and around that. So I did face some doubt from others. I did get the, why don't you just get a normal job? Why don't you just get security? Why don't you just get you do. And I had plenty of
Standard questions.
opportunity. I had offers. I had, there were people that were interested in me working with them. And actually what I decided was to have the balance of that. I actually had a contract, like a private contract with one of the high schools that I'd worked in. So they subcontracted me. So I had a year's contract with them. And I thought, worst case scenario, that day that I do with them will cover my expenses of my office. So if nothing else, I'll make no money at all. I'll probably be out of pocket with the resources that I've put into it, but I would have my overheads met. So I kind of had that security. I didn't just jump in with no fallback. And I also had, a month's rent in reserve, and so I built it from there. And actually probably for the first 6 months to a year, nearly everything I made went back into the practice. So because I then expanded, took on a waiting area. And so again, it was just everything was going back into what I was doing, and having to then get systems set up and pay for, things that I did everything as cheaply and for free that I could. I learned how to make my own website. I did all the courses. So, and marketing, I did all my own marketing, as most startups have to. So I was wearing so many hats. Yeah, but just completely forgot
Yeah,
to
no, that's
credit
fine.
everyone that was very supportive. I did have an incredibly supportive network around me, and I absolutely wouldn't have been able to do it without them. Particularly them saying, you need to stop now and actually sleep or eat or, switch off for a
Yeah.
minute. Yeah. Because all of those therapeutic boundaries we teach, they went out the window and I was doing my own thing. Hypocrite. Yeah. So sorry. The question was
Look,
the
it's
hats.
much easier to give advice, I find, than take one's own advice. And I have this all the time because I'll be helping people as they grow their businesses. And I look some days at myself or my to-do list or what I've got to do. And I'm like, what would I tell myself? And it certainly would not be do whatever the bad habit is that I'm particularly doing at that moment, like wearing many hats. What
Yeah.
bit can you outsource? How can you get help? How can you ask for help? Which I think is really hard. So going
Yeah.
back on that then, have you managed to ask for help? Have you managed to outsource the bits that actually is better off with someone other than yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And that came from a place of me, getting to the point where things hadn't gone right. I hadn't had sort of systems in place that I needed, and so some things went wrong in terms of not having contracts in place with certain individuals, and just not having those structures around what I needed. So I then got the heavy artillery in, and I got myself a business coach who's phenomenal. I work with her. We've reduced it down. I see her every couple of months at the moment, but that's just what I need, sort of where I'm at, and it works for me. And it's really hard because when you are self-employed, everything you earn obviously has to come out. Everything comes out but your expenses, and getting to the point where you're actually earning enough, where you can say, what is my time worth? What is my when you're in a service-based industry and you are relying on the income, like the income's relying on your time, there's only so much of it you can give. And with what I do, there's only so much emotional capacity before I'd risk burnout. So I have to be balanced in that way. And so when you're trading your own time for your income, you have to weigh up what am I able to earn in that time? And then one of the books that I read over the last year or two it was talking about, the trade-off for your own time and money. And actually, would you pay someone, how much would you pay someone else to do these roles that are taking on your time? One of the things my business coach did, she made me do a time audit, and it was such an eye opener. And I thought, oh my
Isn't it
goodness,
just?
actually I'm spending so much time on this or that. And so doing that was really valuable. And actually I'm at the point, I am very fortunate. I'm at the point now where I can have an assistant. So I've got an amazing virtual assistant, and she has taken on all of the human elements that I could not do myself, or I could do myself, but the time it would take me, it's much more valuable for me to have her there doing that. Also, AI has become a thing since I set up. That wasn't really something that was on my radar at all.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate to do some incredible training again through Small Business Britain. And I did that just as I'd employed a virtual assistant. And I was like, oh wait, I can do all of this stuff really easily now. Not the human stuff that requires us, and but the admin and the promotional side of things. And so then I had to shift really quickly how I was going to use the assistant, and in what ways, what human elements could not be replaced by AI. And so I didn't get rid of her. I actually just shifted my mindset and used her in a much more creative way, I feel. And that's worked really well for us all.
And I think that's the key with AI is the shifting, the not necessarily replacing, but the shifting and using it in a manner that works for everybody involved, because it's there to help and it's there to aid. And it really does have some fantastic traits and opportunity, I think, for small business owners to be able to use it. So it's really interesting to hear. You touched on then briefly about down days, the emotional capacity that you have. And that must be
Hmm.
very important, because I would imagine, and obviously we don't need to go into detail, but the cases that you deal with, the children that you work with, there must be some pretty horrific stories, and it must be very draining. Um, so how do you manage with that emotional overload? Do you have support yourself? Because for me, I think it's always very important to ask the question, who cares for the carers? Because certainly overlooked, certainly in the healthcare system, a lot of people say that they are, in the healthcare system, but often overlooked by it.
Yeah, yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, as I'm a BACP accredited, so part of our ethical guideline is we have to practice self-care. There are expectations that you have clinical supervision. If you're particularly challenged, you should be back in personal therapy if it's personally impacting you, the work, and that can come up for all of us depending on our own personal triggers. But that being said, the difference with working for an organisation as a therapist or working for myself means that I can choose my caseload. I can tailor when I see certain clients. So if I know I've got a client with a really heavy trauma history that I know is going to really, really make me feel very emotional, and I'm going to feel all the empathy that client needs. Obviously, I will hold that. I won't show that all necessarily in the session, but I
Yeah.
will know that will impact me in a different way to another client. So I will schedule those clients in a careful way, so that maybe I won't see 4 ADHD children back to back, because I know that's going to take a lot more of my energy and enthusiasm. So I can get that balance, which is really lovely. And I've got that sort of creative freedom with my work, and as have all of the therapists at my practice. They can all, I'm not their boss, I'm not their manager. They're all self-employed, but they can all manage their own caseloads and schedules, and they're not expected to work with anyone they don't feel comfortable working with.
And I think ultimately that probably improves the care that you offer your clients, because you can manage that, because you're not seeing a huge amount of clients in a very short space of time, which I guess is what happens in other facilities, non-private facilities, in the care sector as a whole. And that must be really quite nice for them, and no doubt why you've been quite so successful at what you're doing. How do you relax? How do you get away from some of that really hard, emotional, draining stuff that you deal with?
Yeah, movement for me. I mean, everyone's unique. So for me, it's movement. And that's been something that I've sort of come to about a year and a half ago. I sort of got back into health and fitness. I think the gym is my escape. I'm at a very lovely gym that has sort of spa facilities as well. So I am very fortunate that I can go there and just switch off. If I just need to switch off, or if I just need to move, I can move. But you don't have to have a membership to a fancy gym to be able to do that. You can just get out on a walk. You can just get fresh air. You can get out on your lunch break. If you should be scheduling breaks. So I tend not to do more than a block of 4 in a row of clients, and then I'll have a break of an hour. And that might just be to eat, or it could be to do a bit of work admin. It could be just to move and get out of the practice for a bit. But yeah, just connecting with nature and having some movement. Well-being is an ethical responsibility for therapists. It's unethical not to practice self-care according to the BACP. So it's actually in our sort of guidance. And
Thank goodness.
yeah, yeah. So, and I completely get why. So, like I say, it doesn't have to be a spa day. It could be whatever it is. It could just be taking your family pet out or spending time with friends. It could be however that looks to you, booking an hour in the morning one day to just read something that you love or watch some trash on telly, whatever that might be that makes you feel good and just connected with yourself again. I think it's really important. But yeah, for me personally, it's probably movement, I would say, and exercise.
And would you recommend to anyone that's stuck in a job that they're not particularly happy with, in a career they're not particularly happy with, that they try and practice some of that movement themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our energy, I've just read a phenomenal book. I'm quite a bookworm. I've just read a phenomenal book called Energize, Simon Alexander Ong, and it's just amazing. And actually, what he talks about is how our energy is impacted by so many things, and our own personal energy. And I think if you are feeling down, if you're feeling soulless or destroyed in what you're doing or stuck, your energy will be lower. It will be impacted by that because you won't be as motivated, you won't be as, and so I think it's kind of like, even if you shift yourself sometimes, you might find enjoyment back in that role that you're in. It could be that, this could be a you thing, or it could be the role. And obviously I'm aware that quite often it is the role. I also studied organizational dynamics as part of one of my undergrads. And I found that really fascinating, actually. I think that was really an incredible thing to learn. And I'd recommend anyone to sort of look into that a bit if they're working within organizations. And it's interesting you talk about education. I know off camera we talked about, the biggest people, like the highest number of your caseload come from healthcare and NHS. And actually, those are two of the highest stress related industries, and the retention crisis we have in education is just awful at the moment. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it makes me very sad. I come from a healthcare background. I spent 25 years working in healthcare one way or another, and I guess I still do. And it's sad because healthcare and education is where we need most people. As you say, the retention crisis is there. And people feel so guilty because they are there to help, be it children or people that are poorly in whatever way that looks like. And they generally started because that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to
Mhm.
help. And it's not that they don't enjoy the job. It's not that they hate the job. It's that the system isn't working for them. And they're working in a system that doesn't facilitate the original need that they had for joining that specific career. They cannot function. They cannot give the care to the children. They cannot give the care to the patients because they are so busy doing everything else. So yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to hear what you say about organizations and how that impacts. Do you think you'd ever go back to working in an organization, or are you done now with self-employment and being an entrepreneur?
I mean, I work for a national charity. I have a very small caseload. So, I am still keeping a toe in as such, but I don't see it in my future. No. I think now I've had a taste for it, the independence and freedom that brings. I would never say never because you just don't know what will come up. Um, Again, it's that growth mindset and keeping an open mind. But no, I can't foresee me wanting to do that in the future at all. And I get
So what
requests
does
all
the
the time.
future
I
hold?
get people asking me to apply for jobs, and I'm like, I don't need a job.
Yeah,
I have
I'm
a
good.
business that's
Yeah,
going
I'm
really
good,
well.
thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
But
quite
thank you
nice,
for
isn't it?
thinking of
You never
me.
had any job, I quite like that. I think that's really quite nice. So what
Yeah.
does the future hold?
We've got some exciting things coming up. I can't talk about all of them at the moment, but there is some great things on the horizon. And yeah, I just love the unknown of what's coming up as well. I think it's exciting not to necessarily know. I am working more towards a goal driven sort of plan in my future. So I've shifted the way in which I sort of jump in at the deep end, but I hope I don't lose that courage and spirit to just do that, because I think that's kind of what's led me to where I am as well. So, yeah, some exciting things, but some phenomenal people joining the team, and yeah, we're at a good place, and yeah, long may it continue, hopefully.
That sounds super exciting. And I always love it when people say they can't talk about it, because that usually means there is something really exciting happening and something really good. So no, I wish you all the very best with that. And you won't lose jumping in at the deep end, I'm sure, because I think that's a personality trait. And I think that's a trait that entrepreneurs have, because it is what makes us be able to move forward, have that growth mindset. And we are where we are because of it. I think I'm a big advocate of jumping in and seeing what happens.
Yeah, definitely.
What advice would you give to someone who is looking to start their own business from whatever sector? What advice would you give them?
It's really hard because I don't believe in giving advice. And as a therapist, we don't advise. People expect us to tell them what to do, but we don't. I think I would say, from a reflective perspective as a therapist, I would say think about what you love, what makes you really feel fulfilled in life. Is that helping people? Is that being organized? Is it numbers? Is it getting away from people? Think about those elements that you really love and that really tick the boxes for you. Outsource the bits you don't like. Absolutely make a plan in how you can, if you have to do it initially, fine, but make a plan to how you can get to the point where you outsource the bits you don't like, and just keep learning. Just keep, take every free opportunity that's out there. Network, meet other entrepreneurs and business owners. Go to Ideas Fest if you've not heard of that. It's incredible. It's an amazing festival every year. It's quite mind blowing. You will meet every kind of person on the entrepreneurial journey, places like that, and just hear from other people's mistakes, learn from your own, and just jump in at the deep end, go for it. So many people limit themselves, or they, particularly women, I think quite often you're pigeonholed, and you're then the mum, or you're then the wife, or you're expected to run the house, and actually you are an incredible multitasker. So use that towards something that you're really passionate about. You don't have to drop those other roles. You can still juggle, but yeah, just do something you're passionate about and go for it.
Amanda, thank you so much for your time, for your insight. I'm so excited for you. You have such passion that shines through. And in fact, before we started recording and during the recording as well. And I wish you all the very best for the future. It sounds like there's some really exciting plans. Come and share them with me. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. And look, top entrepreneur, podcaster, amazing. I wish you all the best for the future. And I'm so grateful for your time and grateful for all that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to meet you.
Pleasure. Take care.
Take care. Bye.